One of the lessons beginners take a long time to understand is that you don't need to force in your games. It took me years to understand this, and by forcing, I think of it as trying to do something spectacular in your games to try and gain an edge. And so for many beginner players, I remember being a beginner. I'm now 1649 chess.com rapid, so not an elite player, but past beginner land. And I remember spending a lot of my time Googling gambits, Googling attacking lines, trying to see where I could get an edge over my opponent. And so kind of a stereotypical or caricature of this is like you play e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Your opponent plays knight f6, and you're like, yeah, now I can do the knight attack. And if they play d5, we have e takes d5, and you're praying that they're going to take on d5, so you can play knight takes f7, and lo and behold, you have the fried liver attack. And so just note that this mindset of playing this knight jump here to g5 is just a mindset you don't need. Okay, elite players try things because the probability of mistakes happening in their games is much less, so they're trying to find some edge. But for the rest of us, we are rated what we are rated because we hang material. It's as simple as that. As a 1700, I still hang my material. Okay, I do it less than 1400s, who do it less than 1200s, who do it less than thousands, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we can reduce chess to a graph like the one I'm showing you right now, where on the y-axis, we have the probability of making a mistake, and the x-axis is somebody's rating. And you can see that somebody who has a better rating has a lower probability of making mistakes. Now, we can argue over the shape of this graph, but that's fundamentally what it is. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 examples from my games. 1 where I lost, 2 where I won, where I'm trying not to force. And so the 3 things that I focus on in my games is piece activity, king safety, and addressing my opponent's threats. And what I notice is that when I break out of this and I really get hell-bent on trying to do something in games, I often lose. And so this is the first example. This is the example where I lose. And so if you have a look at this position, I have the black pieces. It doesn't matter how we got here. It's a b6 versus a London system, which is now transposed into a Dutch. And I'm fairly happy with it. My pieces are quite active. Knight e4 might be a move one day. This bishop is really nice on this diagonal. Rook on the open file. Okay, everything's great. In terms of addressing opponent threats, yeah, bishop on d3 just stares at pawn. So I'm not really worried in this position. And so my opponent plays this move, rook to c1. And so I play in this position, queen d7. It's like, well, to take is a mistake. Okay, we hear top players talk about stuff like that. And so if you want to take, then I will put my rook on the c file. Okay, and so in this position, my opponent plays this very useful move, quite annoying move, bishop to b5. And here I just need to go back. And when I, in the correct mindset, that's what I would do. I just go back. But what I really hell-bent on doing in this game is pressurizing this diagonal. And so in this position, I play this move, queen to b7. Which you can see on your screen right now, the evaluation bar sinks. And you do your tactics puzzles the whole time. And you know how to win this game. Of course, you have to play in this position, bishop to a6. Okay? And of course, when you move the queen, which is what I did, I'm going to lose a rook and I'm down material. Okay? And so it's a very simple tactic that many people will see and you do in your puzzles and stuff. However, the reason this mistake is coming about is because I'm so focused on this diagonal and putting pressure on it, and it's just a mindset that I don't need to have. At this level of chess, people are just going to make mistakes and throw away the game. And so I'm going to show you 2 more examples where I have this kind of philosophy and my opponent just throws away the game. Okay, so I'll show you a second position here. This is a game that I won. And here, I'm pretty happy with my position. I have a nice queen here on c2, very typical of b3 games. This bishop could be better, but it's on a nice diagonal. I want to move this knight and make it more active. I have the opportunity to kind of castle either ways, and so I'm not worried about king safety. My opponent doesn't have any big threats here, so remember my 3 rules here. Just focus on these things. And in this position, my opponent plays this move b6, which I think is a little bit dubious. And here, I create this discovered attack on the knight. However, what I'm really trying to do is just maneuver my knight to g3. And then I'm thinking, well, if there's bishop b7 after castling short, there is no real threat here from my opponent. I'm going to have two knights and a bishop next to the king. There's plenty of resources to defend. Okay, just maneuvering. And I was even thinking in this position that after knight takes e4, that's a huge blunder, because queen takes c6, there is a double attack on this rook and on the knight. And for all of you that are amazing at defending in chess, this is not this knight takes e4 move is not a blunder. There's a way to defend here. Well done if you figured it out. You might want to pause the video and figure it out. The way to defend in this position is to play bishop f5. Okay, so nice cute little defense here, where then both the knight and the rook are then protected. Anyway, my opponent doesn't take. Instead plays the move that I thought they were going to play, bishop b7. We have knight to g3. Okay, bishop d6. And now we have bishop to b5. And there's all kinds of threats here. Obviously, there's a double attack on this knight. But there's also a potential remove the defender tactic here on this e5 pawn. And so my opponent plays this nice little move, knight to a7. And we go back, bishop to e2, knight c6. And just notice that my opponent is 1747. They're 100 points higher than me, and I'm happy to take a draw. Just repeating this position, just gain some free elo out of a draw. Okay, and my opponent doesn't oblige. I can understand. They play rook e8. We have castle short. And okay, pieces are active. King is very safe. And my opponent starts to just do things in this game, which I think lead to a lot of trouble, and a lot of unnecessary play starts to happen. And I'll show you. So we have rook c8, rook c1, queen d7, queen to b1. The queen moves out of the x-ray. Okay, so remove the queen from here. And I think this position starts to unravel after this e4 move. First of all, this just liberates the bishop. And so e5 was controlling what this bishop could do. After e4, if you're wondering, bishop takes f6 doesn't do much. Let's say e takes f3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, g takes f3. G takes f6, it looks like everyone has double pawns. So you're not going to achieve anything here. To take is a mistake. And so in this position, I just play knight to d4. And here, again, my opponent is doing something in this game. They're trying to force, trying to make progress in the game. They play this move, bishop takes g3. And I decide to take away from the center. What's the point? Just activate the rook. Okay, there could be all kinds of tactics here. And again, my opponent is pushing. This turns out to be quite a big mistake. I play in this position, knight to f5. And my idea here is, obviously a knight on f5 is just very strong. It's protected. And you could have a tactic like knight takes g7, king takes g7, bishop takes f6, check, which would win back the piece, but you want a pawn in the process. And so I guess in this position, my opponent needs to play something like rook c6. But you see the game has started to open up in my favor. And my opponent pinches this pawn here on d2. And they're already losing, but they're losing more now. And they're probably thinking, well, they have time here because the bishop is under attack. But after bishop to c4, there's all kinds of threats here. I mean, this could be a threat. Yeah, this could be a threat. This is a threat. And my opponent plays in this position, rook to d8. And of course, after rook to d1, the queen is trapped, and my opponent decides to resign in this position. But if you go back to what I'm trying to talk about in this video, it's this mindset of trying to force. You have e4 in this position, bishop takes g3, c5. All of these moves were not really necessary. At our level, people are just going to throw away the game. Just try to improve your position. Try to make your pieces active. Okay, so in this third example, nice little example. Again, playing somebody that's quite high rated here, 1787, okay? It takes all the way up until move 13 for my opponent to blunder. It was just a question of who was going to blink first. In this case, it was them. And what's really interesting about this is that we're just making moves, concentrating on activity, king safety, and nothing really happens until someone blinks. And so we have b3, knight f6, bishop b2, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, c4, d6, g3, castles, d4, knight to d7, bishop g2, c6, castles, queen c7, knight to d2, and here maybe I'm going to control e4, or play e4 one day, who knows, right? And we have e5, e3, rook to e8, queen c2, activate the queen, connect the rooks. Okay, so it's all just basic play, guys. All right, just activate your position. And we have e takes d4, knight takes d4, and then my opponent makes this move, knight to c5. It's kind of understandable. They want to liberate their bishop. Okay, but it's liable to this tempo gaining move here, b4. We can gain some space, on the queen side. And just need to go back. Right, just do something like this, but it's annoying for them because then their bishop is not activated. Just go back here. Still annoying because their bishop is sleeping. And so in this position, they just reason, now we're 13 moves into the game, they just play this move, bishop f5. They're like, oh, well, if you take my knight, I'm going to take your queen. It's not a threat, guys. Just a horrible blunder. After knight takes f5, g takes f5, b takes c5. We just want a piece, and my opponent resigns. And you'd be like, well, chess, it can't be that easy. But just understand, guys, that at our level, we are rated what we are rated because we hang pieces, guys. Eventually, somebody's going to blink. And so you just don't need to force in your games. You can concentrate on the 3 things that I talk about, and some tactic is going to emerge. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much for your time.